Good evening. This is Lisa Moyer, and I am narrating the HDFS 350 Chapter 6, Supporting Children's Growth and Development for my class, Spring 2017. I know we've already covered some of this, but I want to finish this out so we can move on, and we didn't get very far. So some of this might be repeat. First, we'll start with parents' beliefs about children, and we talked about this a little bit. When parents and caregivers believe that the children can't control their behavior, or can control their behavior, I apologize, and that misbehavior is deliberate, parents are harsher and angrier with their discipline. So that's what the research shows. Also, if they believe that too much attention and attentiveness to babies is spoiling them, they're less likely to provide the amount of nurturance that infants need, and they won't hold them as much, and babies need to be held. So beliefs matter. They matter a lot. When we talk more about child abuse in later chapters, we'll get into this a little bit more about how beliefs are tied specifically to child abuse. Creating a collaborative family atmosphere. So we talked about this too, I believe. Mutual responsiveness, responsive, sensitive, and positive responses to the infant or toddler is more likely to help them form a secure attachment, and then children are more willing to respond and cooperate with parents. Routines, try to meet everyone's needs with the least amount of conflict. That's the goal. That helps children to know what to expect, when to expect it. Giving them responsibility helps them understand that they participate in the collaborative environment that is the family. Encouragement, of course, is necessary to help children learn to develop self-efficacy, or their belief in their ability to do things, as well as their self-esteem. And when children get upset, it's important to talk to them and find out what's upsetting them and help them recognize any emotions they're experiencing. And then sensitive discipline includes all of this. It's not just how a child is disciplined when they have done something that is deemed misbehavior, but it's the whole thing. It's how the parents respond to the child in a positive way, which results in less likelihood of having to discipline for misbehavior. And so back to sensitive discipline, just another second. There are things that parents can do in addition to the mutual responsiveness routines and encouragement: reasoning, refocusing attention, expressing appreciation for things children do, helping them to verbalize and name their feelings, help children to withdraw from tantrums, talking to children during routines, giving advance warnings if there's any big changes coming, and of course playing and having fun. All part of sensitive discipline. Another part of creating a healthy environment for babies, toddlers, children is paying attention to things like safety, eating, exercise, and sleep. So page 180 in the textbook goes over the various actions that one can do to make a house safer for a baby, for a toddler, for children. And experts recommend now that we do baby-proof. It's not lazy parenting to baby-proof, which is one of the myths about it. It's actually helping your child to behave and to avoid dangerous situations. So covering the outlets with those little plastic covers, instead of not covering them and yelling, "No, don't touch," every single time, covering them would be considered part of positive discipline or sensitive discipline. Eating healthy, again, this is all tied to sensitive discipline. Making sure that children get the nutrients they need, making sure they're eating healthy, they're eating on a regular schedule, Most of the time, when children do get upset and cranky, it's due to lack of sleep or being hungry. You know how you feel when you're hungry. So, making sure that kids get those needs met. And exercising, children need to, well, the more likely to mimic what families do. So, the family that exercises together is teaching children that exercise is an important part of the routine. And it gives children the amount of movement they need to develop in a healthy way, um, helps them to enjoy time more, to learn how to focus their time, to participate in teams, to play with other children, to exercise their imagination, um, doing things, moving around. It's critical to child development. Sleep is also critical. One of the easiest ways to get children to go to sleep and to stay to sleep um, is by, I apologize, my computer was on, so there was a beep, um, is by having a routine that's followed every night so that as babies and then as toddlers and children, they know what to expect. Having a bath at bedtime does help to calm children down. The warm water is nice. They're nice and clean, which will help them sleep better. Reading them a book, helping them or letting them choose which book to read. Having a night light or a sound machine. Some darkness, maybe not too dark though. And temperature-wise, not too hot, not too cold. Comfortable enough that they need some type of cover over them. But they shouldn't be freezing, obviously. So helping, again, children to get their needs met so that they don't reach the point where they're overly frustrated, stimulated, cranky, tired, having tantrums. That's all part of sensitive and positive discipline. Looking at the benefits of media, TV is so is computer use, a big part of child development now. And we need to look at what the research says to understand whether or not something is beneficial or harmful to children. Children under the age of 6, they really should be limited on how much time they're allowed to spend watching TV or playing on some type of computer or tablet. At about 2 years of age is when most parents start allowing their children access, and the time tends to increase as they get older. Experts say to really limit that time and limit what they're exposed to, making sure it's developmentally appropriate so they're not scared, they're not confused, the content they're viewing is relevant to their age. About ages 8 through 18, children spend anywhere from 4.5 to 10.5 hours a day being exposed to media. Again, that should be limited. It should be used as not an entitlement or a right, but rather a reward. And so it's a privilege. It shouldn't be just a given. It's one tool that parents can use when negotiating with children about any misbehavior that needs disciplined. Social media, there are many risks associated with social media, many of which we're probably all aware of. Things like cyberbullying, inappropriate content, the lack of understanding of privacy, the influence of marketing. So they're exposed to all of this. A good example, which really is kind of jumping to a different topic, but really helps to bring this point home. A friend of my wife's cousin, who was killed in a car accident last summer, the cousin was, he was in high school, and a friend of his attended his funeral and took a picture of him in the coffin, in the casket, and brought it to school, or brought his phone with him and showed it to people that didn't make it to the funeral. The mother of the cousin got very upset about this, said it was completely inappropriate, violating privacy, basically pretty much got very upset and wanted some type of intervention. And what ended up happening was somebody did mediate and explain children don't really understand that, and adolescents are still children, they don't understand that that's not appropriate. They've only grown up in the age of social media, and they need to be taught what's appropriate and what is not appropriate, and what social etiquette exists. So neither side was wrong, um, but there needed to be more understanding and compassion about what was going on. Because without guidance, children don't inherently know what's appropriate. And then that also is true when it comes to rules for media. There are filters that can be used. Children can use special programming. They can also check to see what pages their children have been visiting. It's important to pay attention because research does show us that children are affected by their exposure to media. So we need to know what they're doing, and it's not violating privacy, it's parenting, and it can be done in a sensitive way where both the parent and the child understand that this is part of parenting and caring, and that media use, again, is a privilege, not a right. So here is what, this is directly from your textbook, but here's what your textbook or what the research says about exposure to media. So children that are exposed to background TV, it's on all the time. People may or may not necessarily be watching it. It's on during dinner time. It's just kind of on. They're more likely to watch more TV themselves. They don't read as much, and they're read to much less than children that grow up without background TV. And then TV for children ages 0 to 3, they don't, the associative behavior, they need direction. They don't learn easily from media. They need guidance. Parents need to interact and speak with children about what they're viewing and know what they're viewing. Children that have been engaged in heavy media use, all types of media, they end up having difficulty paying attention, and they exhibit poorer grades compared to children that aren't exposed to heavy media use. And then the educational media that exists between the ages of 3 and 18 has been shown to increase academic achievement and reading skills and reading desire. So that's a good thing, the educational media, but be careful and know what it is you're looking at. Don't just accept the label saying it's educational. And then pro-social media, so things that encourage children to make the right choice, to be social and compassionate, and to care about others. That's been shown to increase altruism and tolerance and acceptance of people that are different. Media with aggression and violence, the research is very clear about this because there's been a lot done on it. There is an increase in aggression in children's behavior, even when controlling for aggression in the home. So just exposure to aggression and violence to the media is enough. Media with sexual content, honestly, there's not enough research to say definitively exactly what happens. Many believe that being exposed to sexual content would have a negative impact, encouraging children to engage in sexual behaviors. But again, without the supporting research, we can't say definitively. Problem behaviors. This is always fun. So how to handle it? What are you supposed to do? There are natural and logical consequences for choices. So natural consequences are the response of some type of physical act. If you don't eat, you'll feel hungry, and you won't have as much energy. If you don't put your dirty clothes in the laundry and leave them on the floor, they won't get cleaned. You won't have them to wear when you want to. So many times parents will choose to let their children experience natural consequences. So they understand that there is a consequence to their natural choices. And that allows them to learn that, hey, I need to put my clothes away, I need to eat, etc. Logical choices are followed by logical consequences. So events that follow some type of social act, a logical choice. If a child decides or determines they're going to lie, people will stop believing them. If they choose to misuse or disrespect somebody else's property, other people won't trust them with their property. So, again, the consequences associated with the choice. It's important that children understand the flow, the direction of that. They get it, and that's how they learn to control their environment, control the outcomes. Contracting. Um, so, offering desired rewards for the performance of certain activities without reminders. It may be that you contract with your child that if they do the chores that they're asked to do without being reminded, without having to be on them all the time about it, that they'll be rewarded in some way, something that they value. That can also work because, again, they're learning about controlling. The locus of control is on the child. They're understanding, I have control over what happens if I do this. And then negative consequences, parents need to intervene early. They need to remain calm and objectionable. State what was violated, what rule was violated, what happened, what didn't the child do, or what did they do. Don't argue, because there's no point in arguing, and don't entertain the child's argument. Very simply, they lied and went to their friend's house instead of coming right home. There is a consequence for that, and they have to understand what that consequence is. If a parent makes the statement that there will be a consequence, they need to follow through. Otherwise, children learn, they're not dumb, they're just like adults this way. They learn, that's not really going to happen, I can do this. So you have to be consistent. And it should be a mild consequence at first. If the behavior continues to happen, the consequences should increase. And so it may be no TV for this week after dinner. The behavior happens again. Now it's no TV for 2 weeks. The behavior happens again. Now it is loss of their tablet. They don't have access to it, and they can't watch TV, etc. So they understand that this is going to continue to get worse until they stop the undesired behavior. Ineffective forms of discipline. So we do need to talk about this. Ineffective forms of discipline are often linked to misconceptions about children's behavior and their intent. So first of all, let's start with inconsistent discipline. If you do say there are going to be consequences but don't follow through, the child learns that that's inconsistent. It's not going to happen. So the discipline that a parent chooses to use is not going to be effective. Irritable or harsh discipline, also not effective. So the child's more focused on the parent's anger. Having a harsh consequence or for behavior that is not desirable can be particularly harsh when it doesn't match what the child actually did. And so if they did, let's say, go to the friend's house after school, even though they're supposed to come straight home, then taking away their phone privileges, their TV, and no going to friends for 3 months, that's a pretty harsh discipline. And if a parent feels irritable about it, they're probably going to use a harsher discipline. So parents need to stop and think about taking some deep breaths, stepping away from the situation before inflicting some type of consequence. That's important. The goal here is not to punish, the goal is to teach. And it's not going to be effective if it's done in anger. Low supervision, low involvement. So the things that we talked about at the beginning of this lecture with the safety, the health, the nutrition, the sleeping, the routines, the reading, being involved. That's all part of discipline because you're involved in the child's life. You know what's going on. They're being supervised, and you are developing a close relationship with them. If you're involved with them, you know what's happening. And so the discipline that is used when consequences are used, they'll be more effective. And then inflexible, rigid discipline, same punishment regardless of the act, that's not going to be effective either. Some behaviors are worse than others or are extremely dangerous and need to be dealt with in a different way so that children understand. They get the level of this is completely unacceptable. So grabbing a cookie before dinner is not the same as darting out into the street without looking both ways because they could be hit by a car, hurt, or killed. So the consequences should not be the same. I hope that makes sense. Coercive discipline. So why do parents use coercive discipline? When we're talking about coercive discipline, we're talking about controlling discipline and spanking. This type of discipline doesn't teach children self-control or what they need to do or teach them to problem solve or think about other ways of handling a situation. Spanking and controlling children becomes less effective over time, and the research is very clear. Using coercive discipline is linked to long-term harmful side effects. That doesn't mean that this is a guarantee, and that's definitely going to happen for children. What it does mean is that it increases the likelihood. And this type of research has been conducted for years, for decades. So it's pretty clear what happens when parents choose to use coercive discipline. It's difficult for adults to see any negative behavior associated with spanking because in the immediate sense, it works. The spanking, they believe, doesn't really hurt the child, but gets them to stop the bad behavior. Unfortunately, it also teaches children that they are a victim and deserve discomfort and suffering when they've misbehaved. It harms their self-esteem. It affects their self-worth. It can affect their ability to form successful long-term relationships. The child is more likely to develop a "you can't make me" type of attitude and response, not only to the parent that uses spanking, but to all adults in their life. The child doesn't learn to control anger. They learn that when you're angry, you lash out physically. That's how you solve problems. The parent and the child both become obsessed with order, control, and obedience. The focus is on obedience and control, not on teaching and helping a child to think about and realize the logical consequences of their choices. Children can remember the pain and the shock of being spanked for many years with a lot of clarity. When you ask people about that, if they were spanked, most likely they can remember a specific incident or many incidents where they were spanked or physically punished and how shocked they were and how it affected them over time. When children are spanked, they show less empathy and compassion for others as adults. It's also linked to more depression and anxiety in both adolescence and adulthood. So why? Why these negative outcomes? Parents that don't spank, that choose not to use any type of physical discipline, use clear and consistent positive parenting strategies with their children. They teach them that there are natural and logical consequences to their behavior. They teach their children the how and the why. They provide lots of love and affection. They keep the house safe for the child, try to create the most healthy and safe environment possible, which does help children to behave. And they reward good behavior and provide lots of encouragement. So, not only when just the child has done something outstanding, but all the time. So, when parents spank, they tend not to do these things. They use spanking, it's the quick and dirty method of getting results. And oftentimes, the quick method is not necessarily the best, particularly when it comes to spanking. So, and verbal punishments can be just as harmful depending on how they're carried out. When it's used in a controlling way, and when name calling is involved, or shaming, telling the child, labeling them as naughty or bad, or I'm disgusted with you, I can't look at you right now. These things can be very harmful to children over time, sometimes more so than physical punishment. So there is an activity that I'm going to assign regarding what the research says. And I will post this on Blackboard after the class time on Tuesday, March 21st. So class normally starts at 12:30. That's when you'll be able to find this assignment. You will have to go to the folder that says what the research says about spanking. You will select one of those articles to read. There are a few to choose from. And then you will summarize what it says in a paragraph and submit that on Blackboard. So I will provide a place where you can submit that. Again, just read one of the articles. You don't have to read them all unless you want to. And submit at least a paragraph, 3 or 4 sentences regarding what the research said in that article about spanking and the outcomes associated with it. Okay, that's it.